Hello everyone, today I'm taking a look at Mountains Out of Molehills. This is a brand new game from the OP that plays with 2 to 4 players. Now it's got a mix of sort of game mechanics, it's got some drafting, and then it's got some action programming to actually move around and cause the molehills to appear, topple, and hopefully score you some points. Let's roughly go through how the game plays, and then I'll sort of give my thoughts and everything. Just so you're aware, the OP did send me this game to review, but that doesn't change how it plays, and it certainly doesn't change my thoughts. Played out over 6 rounds, and they're all basically the same with a minor difference. We'll come back to that at the end. Now at the start, you're going to deal a market to the middle of the table of so many of these cards. These are the programming action cards you're going to be using. The number is 5 cards per player. So in a 2-player game, you're going to have 10 cards in the middle of the table to pick from. Then going around the table, starting with whoever's got the number 1 token, 2, 3, 4, depending on your player count, you're going to be drafting the cards. Now these cards are forward movements, maybe 1, 2 or 3. They are turn left or right, maybe with a movement. Maybe there's a turn left or right card. Maybe there's a turn around and move 1 card. And then there's a couple of special ones, which include topple, which we'll come on to when we're talking about toppling, and also a rock. Now, that's going to be sort of a bit of a disruptor during the game. So you're going to be drafting these cards, and once all players have 4 cards, the rest of the market is discarded, and you move on to the next step. In this phase, you look at your 4 cards and you order them in any way you want. It doesn't have to be the way you drafted them. So you could have drafted a card first, but then choose to actually use it as your last action. You're going to put those in a pile with what you want to happen first at the top, then slowly going down in the order you want to do it. Once everyone's put the cards in the order that they want, everyone is going to say they're ready, and then starting with the person with the number 1 token again, going round 2, 3 and 4 depending on your player count, you'll each play a card at a time and perform its action, if possible. Now, these moles have a direction. They are going to be either facing one of the 4 directions. They're never going to face the diagonal. Now, depending on how they're facing is basically what's going to happen. So if it's movement, you're going to move to the number you can move. Now, if you run into another mole or run off the edge, your sort of leftover movement is going to be ignored. Now, it's when you move into a new space that you end up actually placing your coloured molehills. If you're just turning on the spot, you don't create any molehills. Now, some of the cards do have, say, a turn and a movement. You're allowed to break that up in any way you wish. So you could move and then turn, or turn then move. Now, this can be very important as you've programmed what you want to do, your 4 actions, in a specific order, but other people might be getting in the way. The rock, for instance, is going to be placed potentially in your way, so if you were to run into it, it might cause you to turn left, right, or turn around. So maybe you could use that turn earlier and not hit it. You go around the table with each player playing 1 card at a time until everyone has performed their 4 actions. Each round, each of these molehills are going to have a certain height limit. In round 1, this height limit is 2, but everyone is sort of probably in their own corners, maybe getting a little bit of overlap in the middle. Not necessarily all the time though. By the end of the game, the height limit in round 6 is 5. Now what does that actually mean? Well, it means if in round 1 there are 3 bits, it's going to topple. So the way that works is you take the bottom piece and leave it where it is, and then based on the height, they will fall in a direction, potentially causing more to topple. Now, if things are toppled off the board, they're just returned to the player's supply. Once everyone has taken their 4 actions from their cards, then you're going to move on to the last phase, which is split in 2, which is score points, and then determine the new turn order for the next round. You gain points very simply by which molehills you control. You control it if it's your coloured hill bit at the bottom, and you score as many points as height. So in this case, the red player here would be scoring 3 points because it's 3 high and they control it. Now, this is certainly not what the board would look like, but it's just as an example of the scoring. Once everyone's scored their points, you then determine who's got the most from the top down in terms of who's at the top of as many hills as possible. Then they are going to get to choose whether they want to go first, second, third, fourth, depending on the amount of players for the next round. So in this case, the yellow player here has 2, the other two players have 1, green doesn't have any. So in that order, you're going to pick basically when you want to go in the next round. And you're not always wanting to go first, because if you go last, you can potentially be literally undermining other people's plans. At the end of the 6th round, whoever has the most points is, well, crowned the best mole. Now, that's roughly how you play. Like I said, there's a few things like toppling. Well, it basically means you just topple wherever you are, regardless of the height, and little things like that. But that is how you actually play. Now, there is a setup here for 3 or 4 players, depending on the amount you shrink it. And these actually flip over if you want to play a 2-player game, just to reduce the size, and it means there's going to be more overlap. And, well, that's one thing about this game. There is definitely overlap between the 2 players. While in that first round, you probably won't overlap too much because you're going to be moving around and, you know, maybe going in your own direction and scoring some points. Realistically, by round 2, and if not, certainly by round 3, you will be accidentally or on purpose going underneath the molehills that others have already created. And this also works for the toppling. In round 1, it's very, very rare to see something actually topple in round 1, despite the limit being 2. When you get to sort of the middle rounds, it does start to happen that bit more, and then again by the end, they're high enough that it doesn't seem to occur huge amounts. Now what this means is, at the start of the game, you're not having to worry about that toppling, you're just sort of moving around and getting some points. Once you've played that first round, you understand how, you know, the drafting and everything affects what you're doing, and then the game kicks in. Now, I don't think that's necessarily bad even in future games, that you've got like sort of a not an introductory round, but a round where it's kind of peaceful, because it means that, you know, you're just setting yourself up for good points for hopefully the future rounds of the entire game. Now, I really do like these acrylic, sort of transparent acrylic with then the design of the moles on. I found it's very easy to know exactly which way they're facing. But I have, like other people, managed to fail with my lefts and rights in this game. There's cards in the deck, for instance, that is a left turn and a movement, and I picked it up thinking it was a right turn, and that's completely on me, and that can cause, you know, your programming to completely fall apart and not do what you were expecting at all. Now, you can't really blame the game for that, because it's very, very obvious that it's a left or a right turn on the card, but sometimes when you're planning and thinking, you're not necessarily paying full attention. So that's one thing I would say to be just careful of. And then there's the fact that you're doing this drafting, and then you've got this sort of logic of, I want to be underneath some of the big towers. Can I take that big one off my opponent? Can I cause that other one to maybe topple? Now, toppling is a mixed bag, because you normally want to be at the bottom of the big stacks, because that's most points. But it could mean that you're toppling it onto other ones of your stacks, you're not losing the points and stuff like that. So it's an odd one. The toppling you often want to avoid, though when it occurs, it's more like a damage limitation. There is, like many games where you are programming, a little bit of chaos here. You're doing one action at a turn, you're not playing through all of yours and then the next player. So what other people are doing can really sort of muck your plans up, especially when the rock comes into play. You're about to charge across and put loads of molehills down, and bump, there's a rock right there. That can be a little frustrating, and it's an odd one, because in a game like Colt Express, for instance, the chaos is part of the fun. Unfortunately, I do find in some playthroughs of this that because the whole goal is points, when your programming gets interrupted, not necessarily through any fault of your own, there is a slight frustration. But then you let that person get the stone in the draft. You could have taken it so they didn't get it. So there is the choice that you've made, and you've kind of normally let it slip through. You could have taken the stone, the rock, but you didn't. So there's a frustration, but it's your own doing. It's your own fault. You could have done something to prevent it, sort of thing. Now, let's moving on to the design. In terms of the physical, visual experience, wow, it's really awesome. It sits there on the table. People walking past who aren't gamers are like, wow, what's that? That looks pretty cool. It's nice and colourful up the top here. You're moving around this sort of dual layer to the extreme. Now, some players, I haven't found this, but some of the people I've been playing with have found it a little hard to move around the bottom and know exactly what's going to happen at the top. That's going to take them maybe sort of 2 to 3 rounds just to get their heads and focus on how that works. So it means there's maybe a slight player advantage if you've played before. But, you know, as long as you're treating it as like a learning game, I think you can get past that quite easily. Now, there's the actual pieces. Now, I can hold the top one and the bottom ones aren't falling off. Yet at the same time, they pull apart really nicely and easily. This was certainly a part that I was worried about going into the game, because you're always having to add something to the bottom of these stacks. Putting something on the top would be incredibly easy. You know, you are just adding to the top. And well, I've demonstrated a slight problem here. You can accidentally cause actual topples by nudging these, but they are much less problematic than I worried about going into the experience. I thought adding from the bottom constantly, you know, oh, you've got to take it off, you've got to add it on, put it back. Actually, it wasn't that hard, because as I just demonstrated, you can just pull it from the top, add one on the bottom, and plop it down again. Now, when it comes to the toppling, you're then, you know, oh, right, breaking that one off. That falls to there, that one falls to there, it falls to there. Again, I've pulled them apart really easily. I've added them to different areas of the board, and it's not actually... I was coming into it thinking, oh, you're constantly having to add to the bottom. It's going to be quite frustrating, a point of frustration in the game, and it really hasn't been. Yes, we've toppled things maybe once when playing accidentally by nudging something, but normally you literally pull it off, put something on the bottom, put it back, and you carry on. You're adding up to like 3 on a turn, so even that, it's not, you know, fantastically hard. And actually, it creates a really nice, colourful sort of top board with the different coloured molehills. And it's really, really simple to actually just look at the board and know what you're controlling, because you can see, right, I'm at the bottom of that stack. I'm at the, you know, I'm not at the bottom of that stack, but if I am moving that way, maybe I will be by the end of the round and stuff. It's got a good tempo to the game. You're doing your drafting, you're doing your actions, and then you're scoring some points and straight back into it. The point scoring doesn't take too long. You know, you're counting up to maybe like maximum, I think it was seen of like 20, 21 points scored by someone on a round. The more you play, I think the chances of you getting bigger numbers become possible. You know, in the first round, you can do really badly and get like 3 points, but your opponent get like 7. And then by the end of the game, actually that difference didn't make too much matter, because in the last rounds you can be scoring like 20 odd. So you're never fully out of the game. Now, I have seen some people almost write themselves out and nearly come back and do it. You know, they were maybe 10 points behind with 2 rounds to go. Well, actually, it ended up in one of the games where there was only actually after that about a 2-point difference. So they were incredibly close. So it is one game that goes right down to the end of the round, because, you know, the limits of height increase, which means the limits of your points increase. And, you know, it just, there's always that chance that you could sneak that big couple of molehills and get enough points to win. So right until the end, you are in with a shot. But there we have it. Mountains Out of Molehills. You know, it for me, it's got just maybe a tad too much chaos when I'm trying to just score points. I think some people, though, will really love the mixture of drafting these cards, giving yourself the option to screw an opponent over, or risking leaving it there on the table. Moving around, I think this looks stunning. I think there's no doubting that really here. These not just being like random little pawns with an arrow on, that just elevates the look of the game that bit more. And then this literally elevates the look of the game. The fact that it this is the game box, so you just take the components out and then build it up. Really, really well designed in terms like actual design, and a fun game design as well. Anyway, until next time, well, please check out the other news, reviews and stuff on the channel. Like, subscribe and all that jazz. And I'm Oliver East, signing out.